A wildlife encounter I had was one time I was on the street and there's this bug. It looks kind of beetle-like. It's about this big. I'm not sure what it is. Someone told me what it was. One of the people that live in that city picked it up and showed it to me, and it was kind of freaky looking. I still don't remember the name of it, but I remember telling my family about it because it was so weird. The most extreme weather I experienced was when the city that I was in flooded and I had to walk through some pretty deep flood waters to get back to the apartment. Our apartment had flooded too. Thankfully, we had 2 stories there, so it was just the kitchen and washroom area that flooded. But that was the most extreme weather that I had. A hard experience I had was kind of just getting used to the language and culture. It is a little different. I'm pretty introverted and everybody there is very open and very extroverted, and I also am kind of a perfectionist, so not having the language right kind of bothered me, but I think it also helped me to try to work on it really, really hard. The first couple months of my mission, I kind of didn't understand what people were saying and people didn't understand what I was saying, and that was hard for me, but it helped me to really focus on learning the language and to learn it pretty well. I think the craziest thing that happened while I was on my mission was the one time that I was robbed, but the guy only ended up taking crackers. I kind of had accepted it that I was just expecting that at one point I would be robbed just so I'd be prepared if it happened. It doesn't always happen to people. Most missionaries, it happens not at all or about one time on your mission. Some missionaries are unlucky and it happens 3 or 4 times to them. But that was probably the craziest thing that happened. The man was trying to rob us and he told us that he needed money for food and he was hungry and we were women of God, so we were supposed to help him. And I didn't really feel like it was right to give him any money, and the Spirit kind of guided me and told me to offer him crackers instead. So I offered him the crackers instead. He didn't want them. So I told him that I would leave because I had better things to do. And that's when he grabbed the crackers, pushed me to the ground, and ran away with the crackers. But that's probably the craziest thing that happened to me on my mission. Usually everything else was pretty tame compared to that. A powerful life lesson I learned is that it's really important to love people, because that's really what every Christ-like attribute comes down to, is it all comes back to love. Sometimes you might feel like you don't have patience with somebody, with an investigator, with a member, with your companion, but if you think about it, really, what you're missing is just love. You don't need more patience with that person, you just need to love them more. What I miss most from Brazil is probably all of the street food that they have. It was super yummy and it was everywhere and it was pretty cheap, so I really loved that. But unfortunately, we don't have street vendors selling yummy Brazilian food everywhere in the United States. A funny language mistake I remember, it didn't actually happen to me, but it's one that I heard, was there are 2 words that are very similar. They're coco and coco. So to someone who's American and who's entering, you might not be able to tell the difference between those 2, but the difference is that one of them means poop and one of them means coconut. So coconut water is sold everywhere around Brazil, and one time one of the elders was asked what his favorite food he'd had in Brazil was, and he was trying to say the coconut water, but what he ended up saying was the poop water. And everyone had a hilarious moment there, and they all laughed, and then we made sure to let him know what to say so that he wouldn't end up saying that again. I think the best mission prep advice I can give is just reading through Preach My Gospel and being familiar with the lessons you're going to teach, because you're going to teach us all the time. And you want to make sure that you don't just get into a routine and say the same thing every time you teach it, because people will know that you're in a routine and you're just kind of reciting it. So think of ways that you can be familiar with the lessons and apply them to each person that you're teaching, because they'll feel that you really care about them and you want them to learn the lesson. One spiritual experience that I had that really touched me was one time my companion and I had been having kind of a hard week. We hadn't found too many investigators and everyone in our current pool was kind of not really progressing, so we just decided to start over. So we prayed about which street we should go to, and after that prayer we both had the same street in mind. So we decided that must be the street that we had to go to. So we spent the whole entire week knocking doors on that street, and nothing was really working out. And it got to Sunday, and we went around to see if anybody was coming to church with us, and nobody that we'd met that week went to church. And we were pretty bummed out because we felt like we'd gotten the spiritual answer that we should go to this street, that we'd meet somebody there, but we hadn't met anyone. So after church, we decided to go back to the street and maybe knock on the doors of some of the people who had seemed the most promising. And as we were walking along that street, there's this man who's very, very, very drunk behind us, and he starts yelling out, "Missionaries, missionaries." And we were a little unsure of what to do because we could tell he was very drunk. He could hardly even walk straight, but we decided to talk to him. So we stopped and talked to him, and he told us that he really wanted to change his life because he had no money, he couldn't hold a job, and his mom was really disappointed. This man was probably about 40 or 50 years old. And so we told him that we could help him change his life. We said we'd start out by helping him stop drinking, and it was kind of funny. He looked at us with a shocked expression and said, "How do you know that I drink?" And we just said it was the Spirit that told us. We didn't want to tell him he was so obviously drunk that he was falling over on the street. So we asked him where his address was so that we could stop by and visit him later. And he just pointed off in the distance and said, "The green house over there." He didn't remember his address, and he didn't even know what street it was on. He just said, "The green house over there." So then we spent the next day trying to find it, and we ended up finding his house. And he ended up stopping drinking, and he was so excited to be baptized, and then he was baptized, and he received the priesthood, and he got a good job, and he was so excited to be able to pay his tithing. And he became a really great member, and he wanted us to help all his friends who also had problems with drinking. So that was probably one of the best spiritual experiences that I had.